Exercise foresight, poor eyesight, couldn't fist fight, had to overcompensate. Learn to be clairvoyant, see around corners, read signals and warnings, interpret omens, respond accordingly.
Broadcast from later, we are exchanging weak signals of change and trying to understand their significance. A weak signal of change is just something we notice that we don't fully understand, but we think it might be meaningful in shaping the futures of our lives and society. As foresight strategists at From Later, we're steadily tracking and making sense of what's changing. And on these broadcasts, we are giving a glimpse of what it looks like when you're trying to understand something that you don't know anything about. It's basically structured like show and tell. So a few of us each bring in a signal. The rest of us do not know what that item is in advance. And collectively, we're trying to make sense of it. If you're listening and you feel lost and you don't understand what we're talking about, neither do we. We don't know anything. Everything we are doing here is just trying to figure it out as we go. Today on the room call, we've got Valdez, Udit, Erica, our producers, Jeremy and Serena, and I'm Robert Bolton. Erica, what's your weakest signal?
This is a bit older, but Berhard Lang, he does these like very beautiful aerial view images. I guess the most popular is this one of a solar plant field, just solar panels everywhere. And he says that he takes these to really focus on the environmental impact. So yeah, he said there's like this very strong contrast between the technical design of these like solar plants and the field or the desert that surrounds it. But he has these other images. There's like tulip fields in the Netherlands that he compares to, I guess, the Piet Mondrian paintings because they're so like structured. And then he takes pictures of like crate stacks and fishing yards in Germany. I see these often, these kind of images, or these images particularly referenced as superstructures. Something that's just very complex, that has come together in a very structured way is kind of how I've been defining it. But I wanted to talk about what a superstructure is, because I know there are very different ways of describing it. And yeah, I just wanted to start there with the idea of superstructures.
Does he describe it as superstructure, not infrastructure?
No, I don't think in any of his work he's ever said superstructure. It's just I've seen the work referenced in other places as a superstructure, and I think and other images that are similar, where they're at this aerial view of something of infrastructure called superstructure. So my take on it was that is I don't think a superstructure is just simply like a house, fabric, architecture, or construction. I guess I know that superstructures are like very particularly described in cultural theory as like activity that exists within a system. But then there's also the like crypto use of superstructure. So I was wondering if there was like anything comparable between the two definitions of just how superstructure is thought of generally. I think it's my own trying to get a grasp on what a superstructure is and define a bit of it.
How do we define it, and what are the examples?
What is the crypto definition of superstructure? This is not something I'm aware of.
I thought we brought it up one point when we were talking about public entities, like their protocols are free and autonomous and run on their own. I think that was brought up at one point in broadcast.
I think we talked about I think there was like a blog post on hyperstructures.
Hyperstructures is what it.
Which was just like a made up term. Well, this person had coined the term specifically for this. But superstructure is like a very well-defined term. It's not like, it's just like a structure that sits on top of the base structure. And like, I know it's been used in like Marxist theory and stuff. People use the term superstructure.
I guess I wanted to just parse what a superstructure is explicitly and how we feel about the idea of a superstructure, or if superstructures actually get to the point of what's happening in large types of infrastructure, or in the case of like an autonomous protocol or something.
Yeah, why don't we just talk through some of the definitions that we might know that are used for some of these different terms, like superstructure. Etymology of like is super is just like literally above, right? Or on?
Yeah, I guess like a superstructure, if it's particular to architecture, it's something, that's above a base structure. But in cultural theory, it's like a social institute, and then the base is usually something that's along the line of like a political economy, but maybe it's more so on the side of like an analogy then.
Right. The whole system that's built on an economic base is the idea in Marxist theory. Social institutions.
If I heard, hey, his like pictures are considered superstructures, I would have like an understanding purely from like a geometrical point of view, which is like there are structures here, and he's talking about the superstructure. The structures being, these individual solar panels, and he sees what happens when you kind of zoom out of it and look at the structure that's formed from like the sort of like emergent structure when you like get all of them together. And so it's just a point about the geometry. And I don't know if he's like trying to relate that to like, or like in what way he's kind of like relating that to politics or power or the economy or what have you. I mean, the scale is definitely like interesting because, and the juxtaposition of like all this like all of these electronic objects like in the desert is like that stark contrast is like super interesting. And like definitely like, makes you think about the sort of like the scale and the scope of human activity. But for me, like when I hear the word superstructure in relation to this, I'm like largely just thinking about the geometry here.
He doesn't call it superstructure. I just see it always like, infrastructure like this reference to superstructure. So maybe superstructure isn't actually the way it should be described, and maybe art as experience would be a better way to describe what's happening. Maybe I'm bringing up too many terms to describe this like thing in the desert.
Let's get down to like a signal level, I guess. Where did this photography come up for you?
In an Are.na channel called Superstructures, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what else was happening in that Are.na channel, actually?
A lot of like very large infrastructure cited. So yeah, like highways and things that are very ordinary, things that we like experience, but they're considered structures, but I don't know if they're considered art. They're things that we experience every day. And just to see them from that lens, I guess, is what makes them super.
And then let's talk a little bit more about like what fascinated you exactly about these images.
Just that they looked so, not rigid.
Like organized?
Organized, yeah, that's a good word. They looked very organized, like the tulips, for example, because the tulips are planted in rows. They look from an aerial view, it doesn't look like a landscape, really. It looks like a piece of art. It looks like the landscape is designed. It just draws you in because there's just giant lines everywhere. So yeah, I don't know exactly what the signal is, but I just thought that the term superstructure was popping up a lot, especially because I saw it just within the crypto space as this like autonomous protocol. And then there's this cultural theory kind of way of defining it. And I wasn't sure if there was like any ways to compare or contrast it, if they're the same thing or if they were different. So that's where it came up actually, again, is because I saw this artist a long time ago and I saw this channel a long time ago, but it seemed like it was popping, the word superstructure was popping back up. And I guess I was wondering if anyone else had any thoughts about it.
The Are.na channel you're talking about, it sounds like they're just describing megastructures. They just gave it like a different term. There's like a type of way of making these just like gigantic engineering projects that like just dwarf the scale of anything. And it was like big in the 2000s, and then it kind of it was very expensive. Like it ran over what they were predicting for most of these mega projects. And I think they kind of like took it back. They ended up like they're not really being built anymore because they just don't work effectively. So there's kind of like, there's a bit of datedness to the idea of like these like giant, like too big to scale projects, or at least it didn't work the first time they were trying to do it. The other thing I would say like with this imagery is like, it just makes you think of like drone photography. Like there was a moment when like in a lot of different like moody art projects, like 5 years ago, like you would just open with like a drone shot of like an ocean or something, or of a city, because it sets mood so well. I don't know, infrastructure vibes or superstructure vibing or whatever. Like there's something about those shots, but they're also kind of cheap tricks. Like they're so easy in a certain sense. They're like, you can make anything look like, oh my God, this is like a perspective I've never seen, but eventually that trick runs out of steam because we just get used to it.
So how did he take the pictures? Do you know?
Just in like a small non-commercial plane. Some of the pictures I've seen of him in the plane, he's kind of hanging out the side of them at like a very low level.
I mean, like when I look at these photographs, they're like beautiful. And the thing that I find interesting about them is like they all, like you said, have a lot of like order to them. There's like a lot of like structure present. And the thing that is interesting about each one of them is like to think about like what is the source of that order, right? Like why is it or organized in that particular way? Like the solar panels, for example, the sort of like concentric circles out is a way to like maximize surface area to capture the most sunlight. So they're ones that are like, you know, like very systematically ordered in a particular way to like maximize some vector. The ones that are like more interesting are the ones where it's like not obvious where the superstructure is emerging from. So like the umbrellas on like a beach seem to be in like some like structure, and it's not obvious like is that top down designed or like they
The
just
next
like kind of
neighbor
emerge.
algorithm. How can you
Was
not
it was it
tell?
intentional?
Well, not next neighbor. Yeah, it's a social protocol, right? Like where you want to be kind of like near somebody in a certain way, or like you want to like avoid, you want to be close to things,
Proxemics.
but you, yeah, exactly. So to me it like reminds me of like in physics there's like a bunch of different like systems to like model this sort of stuff. That's like where my mind goes. Nearest neighbor algorithms is like one way to do that.
Valdis, I think you mentioned to me that form can exist without function.
Mhm. I had made the point that like you cannot separate aesthetics and function, like that it's a thing that we do conceptually a lot of the time. We were like, oh, that's just styling versus like function. And so like this idea that something is purely functional but is not beautiful, like my point was that doesn't exist. Like you cannot separate it. Like if something is functional, it has to be beautiful. Like you can't design a bridge that is unaesthetic and yet functional. So this was like it's a bit of controversy, but I think I hold by it. I think it's true.
If
I think
something is
that's the point.
functional, it will be beautiful, is what you.
Yeah, the more functional it is, the more it will be aesthetically pleasing. Because what you're doing when you're perceiving things is you're perceiving the affordances of it like directly in the perception. And so something that's like pleasing is not just because it's like a visual set of things, it's because like your eye is like assessing also like how much weight can it hold, like how long can this thing survive for, you know, all these like imaginary things with like what, you know, maybe solar panels do, you know, there's all this like processing going on.
Where does ornament fit in with this, Valdis, for you?
Ornament has a kind of function when it's used in certain like craft settings, like in wallpaper, you know, like ornament has a way of changing the perceptual experience of the space, and like that is its function. And so like the more beautiful it is, the more functional it is for changing how you inhabit space. So
Right. That's interesting though, because when you start going down that path, you can also probably get to the point of like just saying like if you're saying functional, then just saying like the function of this art is to be beautiful. You know what I mean?
like function's not, it's not given ahead of time either. That's the other thing, right? Like you create function through your experience with the thing. And so like the function of a bridge, you know, for us with like legs and we can't move over certain types of environment, like we assess the value of a bridge through its what it affords us, right? And so
Right.
that's all directly involved in perception. That's what makes it beautiful, is that we capture its like capacity in our assessment of it, in our aesthetic assessment of it. Yeah, anyway, it doesn't matter. I don't even know what the signal is.
I don't know. Well, let's give it a shot. Udit, signal or noise? You have to frame it if you for yourself.
Oh, I think it's noise just because I don't think I could frame it. I don't really totally get what the signal is that we're talking about. I think they're beautiful pictures, and I think it led to some interesting thinking. Well, for me, it like raised some like interesting thoughts about like patterns that you can only sort of observe when you zoom out a bit, and thinking through like what is the source of the patterns, like what are the sort of social protocols, the systems that we have in place that lead to these patterns existing. But yeah, I don't really know what the signal is.
Valdis, where do you want to take it? And signal or noise?
To like go back to Erica's like point of like, does the superstructure term mean anything? I would guess probably not really, is my guess. I'm guessing it's like a term that kind of I don't know if it's like specific enough to mean something. And I think like the way I think of it in cultural theory versus like architecture doesn't really speak to the way I understand people using it in this context. And I don't, I know we tried to find what those ties were, but my personal conclusion is like it's a term that sounds cool, but maybe isn't. I'm not sure what if there's that much there's analogical thinking going on underneath it, or if it's just like, I mean, the fact that people are using it, maybe you could say it's a signal and it could become something, you know, but I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, I'll just say noise. Yeah.
The noise is the language, I think. That's like the conclusion here. That's like what came up, the confusion that we started with here, and which has a lot to do with these prefixes and the function of these prefixes, like hyper, mega, super. Like how much confusion that caused us between like having looked it up, like hyperstructures are like a mathematical thing, superstructures are one type of vague idea of construction, basically, and infrastructure, and megastructures are sort of this even grander thing, and then superstructure has a separate Marxist definition with a little bit more like economic and institutional connotation. It's funny. It's like this is like aesthetics first language and function second language. Like they're like really hooky, catchy terms that people like to adopt without being super clear to anyone what they're talking about in any specific way. So that part's noisy. As far as like going to the photography, the aerial photography, there's something I think in what you were getting at, Erica, around, you know, all pieces of it, of what those images symbolize. And I'm trying to wrap my head around like the notion of the emergence, and that these are structures that are maybe seen as emergent, or their beauty is emergent, or their geometry is emergent because of function, as Uda was saying. And I'm not sure what's being implied when people apply that language to something like crypto and are calling like Ethereum a superstructure, or is like meant to function like a superstructure. Are they implying that it could be beautifully organized in the same way? But there are various like degrees of the randomness or rigidness of how the geometry emerges, or how the systems emerge in all these different things. And then maybe they aren't super comparable in the end, all of the things that fit under this title of superstructure.
That's the problem with hyperobjects too. I don't like that term.
It's just too it's too broadly applicable to anything big.
Yeah. It doesn't ask how, to me, the important thing is how do those things come about? That's more interesting than labeling them the same thing. It's like what goes on behind to make that thing cohere as an object. Like, you know,
Yeah.
that to me is interesting. And you kind of stop that process with that term.
Valdez, what's your weakest signal?
So I don't know how many people saw this like news story that probably trended like today or yesterday, and it'll probably be gone in like 3 days. So
He's calling noise on himself right off the bat.
in India, in Gujarat, there was a fake cricket league. I don't know if anyone saw this, that was set up. And as far as I understand, its purpose was to kind of scam a few people in Russia out of money who were betting and gambling on this fake cricket league. And what they did was they actually live streamed fake cricket games for several weeks, posing as though it was a tournament, using like all the same people. And then they set up speakers and they downloaded audio off of the web to make it sound like there was an audience, and also some kind of like announcer speaking over top of it. And they would play that during the live broadcast. And the broadcast was just some patch of like grass in a village in Gujarat. And apparently the channel that it was they broadcast off of had like 250 subscribers. It was like super minuscule. So like, I don't know, there was one of the guys who like orchestrated it apparently had worked in Russia, and so had like connections, and I think through word of mouth had kind of convinced, I don't know how many Russians to try to bet on this thing. I don't know what to make of it. It's one of those stories that's kind of like, it'll pop up in the news for like a few days and disappear, you know, but is it a signal of like anything? Yeah, we had talked about like gambling and sports betting and that kind of stuff taking off. This is also this is kind of like a handcrafted deep fake, you know? There's something kind of like, yeah, craft
Bespoke.
culture, scam craft culture or
Bespoke
something.
fake.
Bespoke. Yeah.
Yeah.
But still scalable. Still scalable.
This is amazing. I had not heard of this until you brought this up, Alice.
Yeah.
So there is a actual like cricket league in India called the Indian Premier League, which is like super popular, super big. It's kind of like, you know, like the equivalent of like the English Premier League for football in, you know, in the UK or whatever. There's an equivalent in India called the IPL for 2020 cricket, which is like the short form, like the 3-hour cricket games. And so like what they were faking was the actual IPL game. It wasn't a new league that they created. It was like, they just like, this season of IPL hasn't started yet. So they just like pretended like it was happening 1 month earlier and like just faked the entire like season, which is so wild because these like bettors are like obviously interested enough to like bet on these games, interested in the IPL enough to bet on the games, but not interested enough to actually look up the schedule of like the real games. It seems so crazy to me. This is like such a specific like sliver of like bettors, which are like the Venn diagram of like interested but don't know anything about the actual schedules.
How do you know the bettors aren't betting on the fake cricket league and they know exactly what's going on and they're down because it's just as much of a chance operation as any other betting for them?
Well, no, it's not.
Yeah.
That's why it's a fake league, because it's orchestrated so they lose money. The umpires will give signals like based on whatever the expected payout is supposed to be, so that they basically whoever's betting will lose more.
We could run our own ring to bet on it with our own, without them knowing, completely out of their system.
The real like 4D chess move is like even the betting is fake, and like this is all done by like the media to like sell like a few like internet clicks. It's kayfabe all the way down.
How long did it go on for?
Were they able to fake? I'm only basing it based on the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is still up. You can go check it out.
They were able to fake a leak for a whole month.
Like around that, yeah.
That's insane.
And what happened? What were the consequences for them after the fact?
They got arrested, and so the news stories are about them getting arrested. So it's not, I guess, over.
Slap on the wrist, or is this a big deal?
They did the thing where they get the players to inform on the organizers, like to turn on them and stuff. Made them snitch.
The production quality here is like insane. Like they got really like good. Actual, yeah. I mean, it's pretty good. It looks pretty good.
Wow.
So let's think about this, like what it signals and where it goes. Like, is this something? The first thing that came to mind is like that we're sort of, as the rules have opened up a little bit, getting some Wild West behavior in the world of gambling overall, and people are getting more excited about betting on more different things. Like there's other signals around this, and just like the new kind of excitement around gambling and culture, or renewed excitement perhaps these days. But is this like a sign there'll be more regulation? What do people think? The continued kayfabing?
It was like very impressive that they were able to crowd like certain stations and perform a league up to a certain degree that I think what it was just saying in the beginning, like that nobody really mentioned, no one was really paying attention to the details. And I don't know, I don't know if there'll be more regulations around a sport like that, but just that the energy that went into like crowding certain stations, or to be able to like overlay the whole league in and have no one notice. It's just very impressive. I don't know.
I want to go back to the point that I was talking about earlier, which is like this group of people are people who like don't know enough about cricket, which is the reason why they got scammed, right? They're all Russian gamblers. So to me, it's like really interesting because I'm like, oh, these are like, maybe these are just investors who are looking for, or like sort of like gamblers who are looking for just another gambling opportunity. They don't really care about what it is, right? Like the cross-cultural gambling is like, to me, an interesting signal, which is like, this just happens to be another gambling opportunity, but you don't really care about what's happening. In terms of regulation, Rob, like the other thing is like, gambling in India is like super, super heavily regulated. So it kind of makes sense this is all happening in Russia.
Mm.
And it was like a cross-cultural scam. The fact that these people don't really know much about cricket is like, to me, the most interesting part of this, which is like, this is just another investment opportunity.
You know what we haven't thought about is like, if they hadn't been caught, could this have accidentally developed into a league, a proper league, and broken free of its scam origins, or at least institutionalized its scam origins and become, you know, something that could compete with the, what was it, the IPL or whatever?
IPL, yeah.
IPL.
If it had kept going on, I just feel like there would have been so many like self-reinforcing mechanisms. Like they would have to fake winners or something to keep it going or something.
I know, but that's how any great scam starts. None of them are planned, you know? They're all just kind of like tactical improvisations based on like an opportunity at the moment. And they snowball, you know, and they just become something with their own lives that, you know, that's why I like thinking about this as like its own, had its, you know, continued, what could it have been?
I mean, and there's some weird question, I guess I was getting at that too when I was saying like maybe people know they're betting on it, or you could just bet on it anyways, or you could get into interesting bets around like, are they going to get caught and when, and all these things. But I wonder too of like the question, you know, how fair does something even have to be for you to bet on it?
They could internalize bribery into the mechanics too, right? If you internalize bribery into this whole system, you could have people like paying the players also to like change the moves or whatever. Like that could be part of the mechanics of the scam.
I wonder
increase like the intensity and the stickiness and periodic reinforcement and all the stuff they do when they design slot machines.
Yeah.
I think beyond the gambling part, like there's also just like these techniques of like social media management and manipulation and experience design have like diffused throughout culture. And so people are just quite able to create essentially these kinds of like fake leagues and whatnot that would have like taken much more than like a ramshackle operation of like unemployed people, which is what I understand it to be, to create and like make work, you know, like to trick people's perception. The costs of entry have lowered, you know.
Yeah.
Because like you can make fake like I didn't do it in this instance, but fake like newspapers and stuff like that would be easy, you know, to plant stories in, or even like real newspapers that you just buy like a kind of placement thing. Different ways of making it seem like you're a legit entity.
Essentially like pay for play pieces on like opinion posts or whatever.
Yeah, and even like more subtle ways, like even like from what I understand, a lot of like tech journalism is just kind of like people's press releases, you know, that are like fed early to certain journalists. And so it's kind of like there's an inbuilt scam in some way involved, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. I guess it just goes to show also that how often things and easily things are faked on the internet, like, and on YouTube at a distance. I was just reading about how those YouTube videos that do all the like primitive tools and they have like people who are like chipping away at the earth and like getting tons of views on their channel, all of those are faked basically. And they had someone like probing them and figuring out that they're not actually using primitive tools. They're like excavating the land. And so, yeah, at a distance, we're all watching these things like, wow, they're using primitive tools to build these like lavish pools in the middle of nowhere. And it's not in the middle of nowhere. And it's just on private land. I think it's a whole thing on YouTube right now.
Fakeness is like a super common theme on Broadcast from Later. I noticed we could do a whole scan of spurious signals. It's been like one of the recurring
the exposés
themes. Yeah. Plausible but fake. Signal or noise, Erica?
I think just based off of the stuff I've also been seeing on YouTube and just how easy it is to fake a whole experience and have people invested in it's coming up as well for me. And so this is a very niche and impressive case of it that has many layers to it outside of that. So that's why it's a signal for me. It's popping up in other places as well.
Everything's fake, everything's a scam, but this was an artisanal deep fake, this scamming with craftsmanship side of things. Would it signal or noise?
I think it's a signal, and it's part of like this like broader set of signals that we've talked about. around
Everything's
the
fake.
lower cost. Yeah, well, the lower cost of like faking something much bigger than yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I lean in that it's noise, but it's a signal of the forthcoming Caesar Sportsbook's odds on broadcast from later signals and whose signals are going to be called signals or noise. I think we need to open that up. Will be a nice dimension.
What the ratio is going to be per episode?
Yeah, exactly. It could be the ratio. Could be like, is Erica's signal going to be signal and noise? Could be what color background is Valda's going to have today. Any number of them.
We should build in bribery so that we can make some money too.
Yeah, I mean, it's built in. I think that's what's interesting about this like new gambling thing, though. It's like, you used to bet on a basketball game. Right now, like Caesar Sportsbook has odds out on whether in this offseason, Kevin Durant, who has demanded to be traded, will end up like a Raptor, a Golden State Warrior, or what team he'll be traded to. And that's like not a closed system the way a sport game match is at all, right? It's like this is wide open. People are betting on the business of the leagues now. It's just a different thing with much more room to like mess. Like if there was enough money on the line, like you might be able to influence them, and it wouldn't be affecting the outcome of a match per se, of what the league's supposedly really interested in maintaining the purity of. Which is just, I don't know. It's weird. It's a weird thing, and it's weird to think what types of things that bribery could change in the world, and consequential, inconsequential, and so on. It's, I think, still noise for me. What's Shawika's signal?
My signal still is also tangentially a part of the set of signals related to fake it till you make it.
Okay.
It's a job or like job finding recruitment website called Anon Friendly. And the premise is this is a recruitment website where you can find jobs where you don't have to identify yourself when you work for your employer. And the tagline is, don't dox yourself. Using your legal identity at work is unnecessary and puts your safety, security, and privacy at risk. Soon, most work will be pseudonymous. In fact, it is already happening. Find an anon-friendly job and join the future of work today. So there's a lot of like underlying assumptions here. One is disclosing your legal identity is unnecessary and puts your safety, security, and privacy at risk. And the second is that a lot of work is happening pseudonymously already. So I want to take that as a starting point for this discussion around whether we want anon-friendly jobs. Is this actually even happening? And if you all have seen any anon-friendly jobs.
Bitcoin founder.
Great anon-friendly job.
It's a really strange idea at this time. The title of it, like that you'd be working as an anon, is playful, but also is associated with like anons. Yeah, it's just a very strange thing to think about, not working and having no one know your identity, and if it would benefit you or how things would transpire. I guess the assumption that you're at risk because you've given your legal identity is strange to me. But obviously some work situations, perhaps having your identity secured would position you better or not position you better. I don't know. But yeah, it's a very strange signal to think about for sure.
How far are they willing to go to anonymize you? Like in terms of like, you can't have meetings with this person, like no voice interaction. You know how you can do that gait analysis of how somebody walks? You can do it with people writing as well, right? Like people's styles of writing. It's like a fingerprint. It's actually very unique. And so you can like figure out who somebody is by how they write. Like how far do the people who are attracted to this anon gig take it? Do you know? Or is it just like a fake anon and they just want to avoid taxes and that's all?
Maybe.
It's the first thing I thought of, taxes.
I mean, if you look at the jobs, they're largely like tech jobs, and a particular type of tech job, which is like easy to kind of scope out and define, where you have like very specific things that you have to do that can sort of like easily be chunked out into like very specific deliverables. So for example, a lot of them are like being a developer, like a JavaScript developer, which like the way like a lot of software development works is like, you have like a project manager who will like assign you certain tickets, and you just go and close those tickets by like, when I say ticket, I mean like a very like well-defined like problem statement you can work on and close in your own time. It's kind of like a bounty system also. It's kind of like that, right? And those are the types of jobs where you can sort of like limit your interactions as much as you want. The other thing though is like if you wanted to become anonymous and you had like real meetings that were like over a call where you were like supposed to be somewhere, you could do it with like a filter or something like that to actually like filter out your voice and filter out your appearance. I mean, you could do a pretty good job, right? And like
super easy,
like masking your identity. And in terms of encryption too, like you could like cryptographically kind of hide where your sort of like data was coming from over a call. You could use different types of tricks to like sort of like route your traffic differently using something like a Tor router to hide your origins. So there's a lot of different ways in which you could do it. I've been seeing more and more like weird projects using zero knowledge proofs. And one fun one that I was actually thinking of bringing as a signal was like a Tinder like app, which is like a ZK zero knowledge app where you could like, swipe right on somebody and it stores this information cryptographically. But you can only like reveal that information if the other person also swipes right. So it's like the proof is only revealed when the other person swipes as well. And the idea there is basically like you can cryptographically show like an event happened or something happened without actually showing all the work kind of behind it. And I mean, there's a bunch of different like techniques to like mask your identity and to like prove the completion of work without actually revealing all of it, which I think are all kind of interesting.
It's a use case, like that's already what Tinder does, like obviously, right?
Oh yeah, 100%.
It already
100%.
has that function. It's just you added a more complicated way to do that, like which I know there's like other cases where like I think zero knowledge is, from what I understand, like very interesting.
Oh, the reason why I brought it up was because of the anon portion of it, which is there is somebody here in the system who actually knows who their two people are, which is Tinder.
Mm-hmm.
And using zero knowledge, you could actually eliminate that institution.
The system wouldn't know even.
Nobody would know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, but nobody's asking for that. Like I don't know who.
Yeah, but it's a toy. It's not like for anything. This is just to like demonstrate a concept, which is like, hey, you can do these things like anonymously in a way that you couldn't before.
What's in it for employers? And should we hire an anonymous community growth manager to build the broadcast from later community?
Anonymously.
Yeah. Is there a reason? Not have to deal with any of the drama of like annoying people?
Well, if you think talented coders are into cypherpunk and being anonymous, then that's the draw, right? It's just that's where talent is, and so you're going to go there to get
what
them.
The talent is saying. Yeah, so it's like there's no reason to choose it for an employer. There might be no reason not to choose it. I'm just wondering.
I mean, you limit your own bias judgments in hiring.
Yeah, for sure. That's a good way to look at it.
We just create new ones.
Yeah, it's just a very difficult task, and getting the right mixture is like a part of that process. So I'm not saying that like you should be basing it off of someone's identity, but it does play a big role in identity does play a role in how people get hired. So this anon scenario is very interesting just because I don't know if I would necessarily want to be hired as an anon. Like, would any of you want to be hired as an anonymous employee?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, there's something interesting in, I think, what you're circling on there with how much of our identity is associated with the work we do and whether that needs to be that way. If we all just like, not all, but I think it would be impossible for everyone to work anonymously, but would a movement towards this sort of affect like the other aspects of identity, like just make it just a job and like not something that like you're building your whole sort of identity around.
And just to build on that, like anons online have personalities and have like an identity to them.
It's true.
It's just that there's not all the social stigmas that are built into our current identities. And so there's also that, which makes it more plausible to me, if anything.
I was going to say, let's correct it. It's not anons, it's it's pseudonyms, right?
Pseudonyms,
Because you
yeah.
still need to be able to assess and trust the individual as being capable of carrying out certain tasks,
Yeah.
right? And so one thing that I thought of when you mentioned the site and why somebody would want to use it is that people cultivate, I don't know,
Yeah.
controversial online personas, and they want to cash in on that value to some degree, because they're known in a community
Yeah.
that, for their whatever heterodox like views. And so they've gained a lot of like cachet, and there's a lot of, I don't know, founders who want to hire those kinds of people. And so this is like the way to do it, maybe. That's what I was thinking. Like, so it's not anon. It's just an alternative identity. But yeah, like Erica, you were saying, like you still have all of the elements that go into like a performance of a personality, it's still there.
Yeah, because you still want to be able to port your reputation around. Because like one of the reasons why you want to you work is to build up
reputability.
Yeah, your work is a source of reputation for people as well, right? And so you want to be able to port that. So it cannot be a purely anonymous situation. But also, I mean, it's also a way to like exit your reputation, right? Like you can like build it up and like just like get rid of it and then start new, start fresh, and no one really cares because it's supposed to be anonymous. What's interesting here is like how do you prove reputation without necessarily revealing your identity also.
Yeah, and like I guess in these cases, like you don't have to give your social insurance to be hired in these cases. In some cases,
only with a ZK, only under a ZK thing or something, right?
Yeah, something like that in the future. Basically, like you prove something has happened without showing all the steps have taken place. So in the case of a credit or like insurance, you could prove, for example, using zero knowledge, you could prove, hey, I have insurance and it is valid without actually showing you my insurance. So that would be a zero knowledge proof for insurance. That would be like the example where you could use it.
Yeah, there seems to be like a whole system that's built behind it, which is kind of crazy to think about. That's outside of like a regular work system.
I think that the heterodox ideas thing is actually like one of the main drivers, which is, I think one of the reasons why people want to work anonymously is because you feel like you have the ability to be a little bit more vocal about your views. At least in my experience working with anonymous people, that's the reason why they take on those identities is just like they feel like they can get away with saying stuff that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Like in their like elsewhere in their lives or something. Like, is that what you mean when you say saying stuff, or at work? No,
even at work, like they feel a little bit more comfortable, like being more vocal, for example, about their opinions because I don't know, some people are shy, also. Like speaking from behind a mask is sometimes a lot easier than being yourself.
Which gets tricky because it's like, how do you hold that person then accountable? Yeah. And it's also not to say that something like this removes you of all accountability as well. Like you're still somewhat tied to an organization and working under their standards or what have you. And so it doesn't completely obliterate your accountability as well, being anonymous.
Yeah. The other thing is if you look at a lot of these jobs, many of them actually happen to be open source projects, which means that you need a lot of public presence. And so I actually do find a lot of like open source projects, you have a lot of anonymous contributors, so pseudonymous contributors. And the reason why is because I think some people are just like not comfortable being that public. And I get that completely working with them. And that makes sense. This is just like a way for you to like retain some element of privacy while still being very, very public.
I wonder if there are any instances where people are going, to work for places that they are otherwise would feel like ashamed to work for, or would want to do this because it's like, oh, now I can finally take that like job at like Raytheon and Ashley Madison or like whatever, that like they just wouldn't have been comfortable sharing with other people.
Yeah, it's possible.
You're not anonymous, you're pseudonymous, so your pseudonym would still be tainted by the Raytheon targeting system.
Yeah, I guess so.
Or maybe you could change it after you were done working there.
Yeah, is your is your experience immutable in this system? Because that could get complicated.
Of course
Put a
not.
ZK on it.
Yeah, of course not. You can create a new identity anytime you want.
Thank you.
I mean, a lot of people do this. Like, if you think about like social media influencers and stuff, there's like people who create these anonymous accounts on social media that have like, huge followings and are making a lot of money, and they're just like purely pseudonymous. Like outside of like open source and like tech and whatever. Also, like there are ways that this is all. It is true that there are ways that this is already happening.
So Erica, signal or noise?
For me, it's a really intriguing idea and scenario. It's a signal. I think just the aspect of privacy and the ways our identity are already tagged to work, just in the ways it could play out, make it really strange to think about. But I guess also I somewhat can imagine like an economy of anons kind of popping up just because there are so many people online that choose to be synonymous or anonymous and work under like an avatar or something. I think that whole world is growing this is one of the ways that I think would actually give it some like weight.
Well, this signal or noise?
Yeah, I would say signal for sure. I think it seems strongly that like the continued proliferation of like pseudonym and anonymous cultures online, and the ability, once you're like unrested from geography and you're able to like cultivate links to people online and like proliferate identity like different mushrooms, like it makes sense that there will be like slight shifts in like how people work based on that. And I don't think like as a signal of like some kind of cypherpunk dream, I don't think that'll happen, but as a kind of like in relation to like our ability to construct how we appear to others, like through online mechanisms, like definitely seems like a signal.
It's interesting to me how anonymity was like something that was talked about so much in the 90s and early internet as like one of the great things about the web, and then it became the dangerous thing about the web, and then it became like Facebook and Google really trying to like authenticate everyone's identity, and now there's been this response to that where there's more and more people wanting to be anons. Like there's been an interesting sort of tide with regards to anonymity online.
It was a New Yorker cartoon, on the internet nobody knows you're a dog.
Something like that, right? Yeah. Broadcast from later.